Somewhere in your family tree, no more than roughly 10,000 generations back, every single ancestor you have ever had looked the same. Not similar skin, not close skin, the same skin. Dark, deeply pigmented, standing under an equatorial sun that could not care less about your well-being. That's not folklore, that's not a guess. As far as the fossil and genetic record can tell us, that is simply what happened. And if that one dark-skinned population is the ancestor of every human who has ever lived, the Vikings, the Pharaohs, the Aztecs, your own grandparents, then at some point, something rewired an entire species, multiple times, on multiple continents, using different tools each time. This is the story of that rewrite, and it starts with a fight nobody remembers fighting: your skin versus the sun. Let's start with what skin actually is, because most of us treat it like wrapping paper, the bag our organs came in. It isn't. Skin is your largest organ, running dozens of jobs around the clock, and one of its most critical assignments is defense, standing guard against ultraviolet radiation pouring down from a star that could not care less about your well-being. UV light doesn't just tan you, it tears into DNA, shredding the chemical bonds that hold your genetic code together. Enough damage in the wrong place, and you get cancer, specifically melanoma, one of biology's nastiest outcomes. The shield against all of this is a pigment called melanin. More melanin, darker skin, better UV defense. Around 300,000 years ago in equatorial Africa, under some of the harshest sun exposure on the planet, that shield wasn't optional. It was survival. Every ancestor of every human alive today lived under that verdict. But there was a second, quieter threat hiding in that same sunlight, one that had nothing to do with cancer and everything to do with the next generation. UV radiation breaks down a nutrient called folate, essential for closing the neural tube in a developing embryo, the structure that becomes the brain and spine. Destroy enough folate during early pregnancy, often before a woman even knows she's pregnant, and the result is catastrophic: severe birth defects, miscarriage. Lighter skin let more UV through, which destroyed more folate, which meant fewer children survived to be born at all. So evolution wasn't defending against one threat in Africa, it was defending against two simultaneously. Dark skin blocked cancer, dark skin protected pregnancies. There was no ambiguity, no middle ground. Under that sun, dark skin wasn't just better, it was mandatory. So if dark skin was such an airtight biological solution, cancer resistance, pregnancy protecting, thoroughly field tested for hundreds of thousands of years, why does most of the planet not look like that anymore? The answer starts around 70,000 years ago, when small groups of Homo sapiens began drifting out of Africa. No grand departure, no single migration, just generations creeping further north decade after decade, until humans were living in latitudes where the sun barely resembled the one their ancestors evolved under. Farther from the equator, UV rays hit the Earth at a slant, filtered through more atmosphere, weakened by long winters and gray skies. The threat that dark skin had been built to block, intense, relentless UV, had all but disappeared. And that same melanin shield, so perfect near the equator, was now blocking something the body desperately needed to let in. That something was vitamin D, a compound your skin manufactures using sunlight as fuel. Vitamin D isn't a bonus nutrient. It governs how your body absorbs calcium and builds bone and supports immune function. Without enough of it, children develop rickets, bones that bow and soften. Adult women develop pelvises too weak to safely deliver a child. In a world with no supplements and no fortified food, that wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a slow, generational death sentence. So the algorithm flipped. In equatorial Africa, less melanin meant more risk. In northern latitudes, less melanin meant survival. Random mutations that lightened skin, once useless or even harmful, suddenly kept people alive long enough to reproduce. Generation by generation, the dial turned. Here's where it gets strange, though, because for decades, scientists assumed this lightening happens slowly and steadily, drifting upward the moment people left Africa. Ancient DNA says otherwise. Take Cheddar Man, a hunter-gatherer who lived in what's now Britain roughly 10,000 years ago. When researchers sequenced his genome in 2018, they found dark to medium dark skin, tightly curled dark hair, and strikingly blue eyes, a combination that looks almost impossible by today's expectations because we've learned to associate blue eyes with very pale skin. 10,000 years ago, that link simply didn't exist yet. The extremely pale skin common across northwestern Europe today appears to have spread widely only in the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. In the full 300,000-year story of our species, that's the final 3%, practically yesterday. So what flipped the switch that fast? Farming. When populations abandoned hunting and gathering for agriculture, their diets collapsed into cereal grains, wheat, barley, oats, and lost the vitamin D-rich foods hunter-gatherers had relied on: fatty fish, organ meat, shellfish. Suddenly, sunlight-driven synthesis wasn't a supplement to diet, it was the entire supply. Add to that the fact that farming villages were dense and interconnected, letting a useful mutation spread through thousands of people in a handful of generations, instead of crawling slowly through scattered bands of 50. Diet collapse plus population density hit fast forward on a process that had been creeping along for tens of thousands of years, compressing it into a genetic sprint. Here's something that catches most people off guard. There is no single skin color gene. Pigmentation is controlled by dozens of genes working together. And remarkably, when East Asian and European populations independently evolved lighter skin, they largely used different genetic variants to get there. Two separate populations on two separate continents arriving at the same solution through completely different molecular paths. When evolution reinvents the same answer more than once, that's about as strong a signal as biology can send that the trait mattered enormously. And while we're here, every blue-eyed person alive today descends from a single individual, one mutation, somewhere near the Black Sea, roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Before that person existed, every human eye on Earth was brown. Something we treat as ancient and universal is, on an evolutionary scale, barely older than farming itself. Which brings us to the real point. Skin color has been used to build hierarchies, justify violence, and divide people for most of recorded history, but strip away everything we've projected onto it, and what's left is a UV calibration system, your body's inherited best guess about how much sun protection your ancestors needed based on where they stood on the planet. Dark skin isn't a deviation, it's the baseline, the original human condition, the setting every other shade evolved away from. Lighter skin isn't an upgrade, it's a local adaptation, useful in some latitudes and a liability in others. The same sun that forced one population to build more melanin forced another to shed it. The star never picked sides, it just radiated indifferent and let evolution do the sorting. We build centuries of prejudice on top of a folate protection mechanism and a vitamin D shortage. And the strangest part is, that process hasn't stopped, it's just been muffled by sunscreen, supplements, and electric light, not switched off. Every shade of human skin walking around today is a different chapter of the same 300,000-year negotiation between your ancestors and a star that never once asked what they wanted. If this rewired how you think about something as basic as skin, you already know what to do. Like it, drop the skin tone question you're still curious about in the comments, and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of story we tell here every week.